Okay, so the first thing that we need to do with our X gantry is I went ahead and used my center marker, which I can't find it because it's in my pocket, and a pencil, and just drew a center line all the way down the top of the gantry. Now, that center line is really just a reference for when you lay out your linear rail. You can look through the screw holes or the bolt holes and make sure that you're still kind of where you should be. So I got my ball screw out of the package. I got both of my bearing mounts on the ball screw. Like I said earlier, I haven't really planned out my Z-plate very well because I'm going to have to make some adjustments to the standard build. But we'll get that. The X gantry assembly is the same. The only thing is, it would make more sense if you were doing it the easy way, which of course you probably noticed at this point I am not, is you'd have your Z-plate all ready to go so you could kind of do this all in one fell swoop. I already know that I'm going to build this, I'm going to get it going, I'm going to get a little bit of testing done, then I'm going to tear it all back down, paint it, and then do a final assembly on it. So at this point we're just laying everything out. Like I said earlier, we're going to start on the motor end. And again, this motor is on the steel bracket on the printed 3D printed standoff. This motor is just sitting in there. You wouldn't normally have the wires coming out the side. You want them coming down the bottom so you can snake them through the tube or wherever you need them to go. So we'll start right there with that. Next up should be our BK mount, which is right here. And I know that there is about 2¼ inches of space between the motor mount and the BK mount. Next up, we're going to have this end of our linear rail. Again, my linear rails are a little goofy because they're 50 millimeters too long because I got a good deal on them. And so there's that. Now this would be a good chance to just look down through and make sure that you've got your screw holes lined up. All right, so once I've got it all done up here, we're going to see if we can get this apart without moving anything. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and take my fancy pica marker. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier. This was a Christmas gift from my favorite son-in-law, John. He saw this on an Adam Savage one-day build. And if you can see, hopefully you can see that, it's a permanent marker similar to a Sharpie, but it's got a long and skinny end on it. So when you're marking these holes, you can drop it down in there and you can do it. Because you can't do that with a Sharpie because it's kind of like trying to shove that into a hole. But these are pretty neat. Now, for my steel, I'm still going to use the drill bit method that I have been using just because it's simpler that way. But I will take my pica marker and I'm just going to mark right where all of these are lined up. I'm not sure why they call this a pica marker. For those of you in the medical field, you'll know pica is a disease where you eat non-food items like dirt and rocks and sticks. But hey, whatever works for them, I reckon. So I'm going to see if I can get this. Probably not going to be able to get that off without moving the mounts and all around. Actually, I don't need the mount on there. So I'll go ahead and get that moved off. And hopefully I can lift this ball screw up without disturbing those mounts. Like so. And we're ready to mark some holes. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm still lined up on my center line. And then I'm going to mark out some holes. So I do want to go ahead and use my center finders. These are 3D printed, I think Brian from Projects by Brian put these out there, but these are out there on the Discord or the Wiki page, but all those do is slip on. Now, because some printers may be a little bit off, and I printed these all in the same orientation, and then I marked one side. So if they're off a millimeter, you'll be off a millimeter in the same direction, at least in theory. So I'm going to get I have a good 7-8 millimeters of travel in my linear rail. So I'm going to get it where I want it, and I'm going to go ahead and clamp it down. Just so whenever I'm marking these holes, it doesn't slide back and forth on me. So now I've got everything lined up. Get my motor mount back on here. Put my motor mount back on. I'm just going to go down the line, and again, with my build and the primered steel, all I have to do is chip that paint a little bit. All right, looks good. Now, again, the thing to remember on here is some of these holes. I'm going to go ahead and mark this out because this one's going to get confusing. Some of these holes are going to be 5 millimeter tapped. Some of them are going to be 6 millimeter tapped. So for the 5 millimeter tapped, we're going to be drilling 4.2 millimeter holes. And for the 6 millimeter tapped, we're going to be drilling 5 millimeter holes. I recommend that you go through and you do all of your 5s and then do your 4.2s. So, or whichever order you want to do it. But don't try to mix and match because you'll make yourself mad. So one last thing that I do want to do on this end, and that is I'm going to drill some access holes so I can get to these bolts that go from my X gantry to my Y rollers. And to do that, I'm just going to use the same template that I used to drill those holes. These front two, I won't need access holes because I can access those from the front. But these back two, I am going to, and I will just use my pica marker for that, and then I'll hit those with a center punch. Okay, Those are good. And I'm going to do the same on the other end. Now these front two will be covered up by the motor mount, so that's a non-issue. And I think these back two will likewise be covered up by the BF mount. So that I think is a much better idea than trying to go through one of the other bolt holes and use a ball mount. Keep yourself out of trouble. I'm all about making life easier. So little spring-loaded center punch. And then doing that will allow me to drop my T-handle right straight down through there, tighten those up, and I think, yeah, it will. You can drop it right down through there, tighten those up. All right, so I'm going to get this all torn apart. I'm going to get over to the drill press. I'll drill all these out. We'll mount everything up, and then I'll show you how I'm going to do the bottom linear rail, and then we'll be good to go. So we're back at the X gantry. I'm not going to reassemble the top because I'm going to have to pull all this off again. You could have done this step, probably should have done this step during the last, and then that way you could have drilled and tapped all your holes at once. But I decided not to. So what we're going to do is exact same thing we did on the top, only we're going to mount the linear rail on the bottom. I'm going to use my little standoffs to make sure that I'm in the right spot. I've got 3 clamps here. I'll clamp right over those to hold my rail down. Once I get it where I want it, I will pull. I just put 1 bolt in each end just to keep it from kind of flipping over. Once I get that, I'll pull those out, flip it over, drill, tap, and we'll be good to go. So again, with this linear rail, it's the same setup except for there's no end caps on this one. So all you really need to do is get it so that it's not hitting either one of your X rollers. About halfway in between. You could measure that out with a micrometer if you so choose, but it's not critical because once you get your Z installed, it's going to interfere over here before you run off of the end of your rail. But I will eyeball it. And I've got a little bit more on this side, so I'll see if I can slide it that way just a smidge. So, I've now got that linear rail roughly centered in the X direction. We're going to line it up in the Y direction. Again, you want these little blocks that you printed, you want them facing you, because that's what we did on the top. Still got about a finger width on each side. It's on there. It's going to be centered because of these little tools that I printed out. So now what I'm going to do is take those 2 bolts out, flip it over, mark it, drill it, tap it, and then we'll be on our way. All right, so we got it flipped over and inverted, and I did that just so that the X's would stay on this side on my little marking tools. So I see it, I can see my center line. I did draw a center line on this before I got started. I can see my center line through all of the holes, so I know that we're good to go, that we're matched up. I'll look down through here. Just make sure everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and mark out everything. Same as I did before, just enough to scratch the paint through each bolt hole. And then we'll get over to the drill press. So, fast forward. All right, everybody, I wanted to kind of bring you in over here at the drill press. I just got all the holes for the lower linear rail on the X Gantry. I got them drilled out. I'm getting ready to tap them. I didn't video that. I put it in one of the first videos. It's all the same. I did want to talk about these drill bits, and this is not a sponsor. This is not, I paid real American money for these. I bought a whole stack of these cheap Chinese drill bits off of Amazon. And my thought is I'm going to buy these, and because I've got a bunch of holes, I think I figured up the 4.2 millimeter holes I've got. There's 25 per rail, 4 rails, that's 100. So I figured I'm drilling 100 holes. I figure if I get 10 holes out of each one of these cheap, and when I say cheap drill bits, I want to say they were $5 to $10 for a stack of 5 of them. They were not expensive. I want to say they were $7, but don't quote me on that. These things have held up remarkably well. If you saw the video where I was drilling and tapping, I show these no love and I show them no mercy. I put them in there and I go to town, and I get them hot enough that it smokes the cutting fluid, and it's like I've said earlier, probably wouldn't treat real good drill bits like that, but I'll tell you what, I'm pretty impressed with these drill bits. I mean, this is 3/16 inch. Granted, it's mild steel. I'm not, drilling through titanium or anything, but they've held up remarkably well because they're all still cutting the last hole as well as they cut the first hole. Now, this one here, you probably, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I mean, it's discolored from the heat. It's got cutting fluid that's basically baked onto the bit because where I'd overheat them. This one right here, whenever I drilled the last set of 6.5 millimeter holes, it was too hot for me to hold whenever I took it out. So, again, I'm not selling these. I might, if I can figure it out, put a Amazon affiliate link down in the description, but I haven't quite figured that part out yet. But I can tell you can go on Amazon and find the cheapest 6.5 millimeter drill bit, and that's the one that I use. So I did just want to kind of give a shout out to these things. Like I say, I bought a whole stack of them with anticipating that I was going to go through them, and other than one of them that I just ground down trying to drill out a broke tap, I haven't had a problem with any of them. The first one that I used to cut as well on the last hole as it did on the first hole. So I'm going to get back to tapping these, and we'll get everything reassembled. All right, everybody, so I got my linear rail mounted on the bottom. Got everything flipped back up. I got my bolts holding my X gantry to my Y rollers in. Now we're going to build out the top of this, and then we'll be done for the day, hopefully. So, motor mount goes on first, and again, this is my modified motor mount. Yours may look somewhat different. All right, so I got the linear rail all mounted up. I've got the slider, the sliding bearings on. I've got the BK and the BF. So next we're going to do our ball screw. Tear it up. Again, at this point, if I had my Z built, I would definitely thread this through. But since we're just lining everything up, we're good for now. I'm going to swap out and get the correct bolts for my BK and my B12, or yeah, BF, BK12 and BF12. All right, everybody. Well, that's going to finish us up for today. I got the linear rails mounted on the X gantry, top and bottom, along with my sliders. I got the ball screw, motor mount, BF12, BK12, everything drilled and tapped. That's 60 some odd holes drilled and tapped today. I'm going to call this a win. Definitely starting to look like a CNC machine. I'm pretty excited. I got the computer last week that I'm going to use to control this. I did decide I'm going to go ahead and give Linux CNC a try, just because that's kind of what everybody else is doing. I think I would end up there anyway, even if I started with Garble, GRBL, just for testing. I think I ultimately wanted to end up with Linux CNC or Mach 3 or 4. I'm not sure which of those I would choose, so I'll use the Linux CNC first because it's free. So if I decide later to upgrade to Mach 3 or Mach 4, I've already got the computer. All of the parts are pretty much the same. So I will get going with the Z design. Again, mine's a little bit different just because I have the taller X gantry. But with the parametric models that everybody's posted, I know Dave has posted one. I think Logan from Canada has posted one. There's several different options out there. You just need to change a few of those parameters. I am trying to learn Fusion 360. I'm suffering through that best I can. It's a little ugly, but I'm making it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get the Z lined up, figure out what I'm going to build. My initial plan is I'm going to cut the Z plates, which will mount here to the rollers. I'm going to cut those out of MDF and or plywood on my mostly printed CNC. I'll get this up and cutting, and then I will cut the actual aluminum plates on the PrintNC itself. So that's all I got for today. Hopefully I can edit this down to a pretty short video. I have been out here for several hours, but through the marvels of video editing, you don't have to put up with all of the shenanigans of me losing parts and having to go find them. So I do appreciate you watching. I know that this is a little slow going. If you're wanting a video every week or every day, I just can't get to it all the time due to life, work, school, kids, commitments. it's a little rough. But I'll get out here when I can, and I'll try to video what I can. Please feel free to ask any questions down in the comments. I do try to answer most of my YouTube comments. I did set up a Facebook group, MFR, mostly printed CNC build, or something to that effect. I think if you search MFR PrintNC CNC, not mostly printed, but if you search for MFR PrintNC Build or something to that, it'll bring you to there. I try to answer questions there, but YouTube is probably my primary social media source. I do have an Instagram. Very, very rarely upload anything to that. But if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I'm also try to be active on the Discord channel, but I'm going to get some of this stuff lined up. I think one or two of these mounts I'm going to have to modify a little bit. I'm going to have to modify these roller plates and reprint those. But I'm going to get that going. We'll get the Z plate or the Z axis built, and then hopefully for too long we'll be cutting. So again, thanks for all your support. I never really envisioned anybody would be interested in watching me build this thing, but I do have several thousand views now between those, and I just, not really why I do it. I do it more just so I can document and go back and look and see some of the mistakes that I made. But I do appreciate everybody watching. So I'm going to shut this down, go inside. It's getting a little chilly out here, but there you go. Have a good one.